requiring adaptive responses. This session will examine how RTOs and their partners can navigate this landscape and strengthen the catalytic role of climate action in sustainable development. We would like to focus our discussion today, and I have a fine panel to join me in the discussion. We would like to focus today on synergies between climate action, SDG achievement, and NDC implementation. We also would like to focus on sectoral perspective across sector issues, and also to showcase the role of research and technology organizations. Also, geopolitical dynamics and their implications for climate priorities, research and policy pathways are part of the discussion. I'm happy to invite a fine list of panelists on stage, so I would like to invite them to come up front and take a seat. So first I would like to invite Mr. Brian Matlana to the stage, Dr. Paulo Gadella, Dr. Viba Dawan, Dr. Lauren Haywood, and we have our fifth speaker, and she's remotely, so also welcome to Dr. Cheong Wang, and we'll have you as a fifth speaker in the panel. And so as a first speaker, we have here Dr. Brian Matlana. Welcome, Dr. Matlana. He leads the climate change and air quality research team at the CSIR. He studied a PhD at Max Planck Institute and graduated at Wageningen University in the Netherlands in 2008. Then he joined the South African National Biodiversity Institute as a research scientist. He joined the Department of Environmental Affairs as a chief director on climate monitoring and evaluation. He's also part of the Presidential Climate Commission. He's an assistant editor of a journal, Climate and Development. Dr. Matlana will share his view on holistic climate perspectives and the link to NDC contributions. Please, Dr. Matlana.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah. This is forward. Yeah. No, wait. Yeah, it's forward. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be very brief. My name is Brian. I lead the work. And a few months later, there was an agreement in Paris where the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, were agreed. It's important to reflect on this because without the NDCs, let me put it positively, the NDCs have brought a lot of positive action on climate change. They've helped the global and national institutionalization of climate change. The scale of funding for climate has increased in the last 10 years, and without having the NDCs as a rallying point, that may not have happened. Lastly, the broad ownership of climate action. In this 10-year period that we are in part celebrating, we've seen active involvement, not seen before by not only governments, but private sector, local government, civil society on climate action. So indeed, it's a time to celebrate. I hope that despite what's happening in Paris, the Parisians find time to celebrate that achievement. The second point is the NDCs themselves are an imperfect construct imperfect in that some people define them narrowly. When you talk about NDCs, they think mitigation targets. I think in the last 10 years, we've shifted from that. Many countries have embraced that these commitments are broader than mitigation targets. What is not yet clear, and I see this coming up in literature quite a lot, is are the NDCs, these targets, let's talk about the mitigation targets of NDCs as contained in the NDCs of different countries, do they reflect the floor of ambition? That is, they reflect the minimum, that what they can do, or do they reflect the ceiling of what countries can do? It's not very easy to pick that up. But this slide basically says that the agreement to have NDCs, imperfect as it is important because they become a blueprint, a rallying point for climate action at national level. However, it is not easy to say we've achieved an NDC because that way the implementation of NDCs requires transformative actions in different sectors, actually in most economic sectors. If you ask yourself, what are these things for? What would happen? As I was preparing for the input here, I was asking myself, what would happen if there were no NDCs in the global landscape? And I found this work by Mary Enas. She's a Swedish climate policy scientist. She outlines 5 functions of the NDCs. The first 3, progress tracker, trust builder, influencer, are more on the information sharing part. Basically, it's saying, see what we are doing as country X, see how we are progressing towards our target. So that's the first part of NDC is about showing best practice. What are different countries doing to reduce their GHG emissions in different sectors? The second part is more political in terms of functions of the NDC. It's about how do we deal with systematic challenges that underpin precisely the activities that increase GHG emissions. And the role of NDC there is to galvanize actions that challenge what we used to do in business as usual, to do business differently, being aware that there is a need to reduce GHG emissions. This is my last slide. And what we're going to talk about today is NDC implementation. And it's very important to bear in mind that NDC implementation has been happening, certainly in this decade. However, it's critical that in the next 5 years, a lot of action happens, because if we miss this window of 2025 to 2030, and our emissions do not show any form of decline, we are unlikely to reach even the 2050 net zero targets that most of our countries have committed to. It's not easy to implement NDCs. There are challenges that are built into them, into that work. At the heart of implementation of NDC is, in my view, awareness. Awareness of the risks, awareness of the opportunities, internalization of the agency for climate action. Who benefits when we say climate action? It's climate action for who? The nice thing about the work we're doing on understanding NDCs is what I've seen in the latest NDCs that are coming up is the innovation that has come out that is reflected in agriculture sector, for instance, the way the agri-food systems are now being structured such that they minimize GHG emissions and yet they contribute directly to food productivity, which deals with the adaptation component. The second last point I want to highlight is the need for international cooperation. Currently, international cooperation, or let me start by saying, international cooperation is the bedrock of climate action. It would be impossible, certainly for our countries, to do what we've done and to do more than we've done without international cooperation. However, that cooperation is currently fragmented. It is constrained by geopolitics. It has to respond to national self-interest. And at the heart of that international cooperation is unequal power dynamics between countries. So we want to collaborate, we want to cooperate, but we are unequals, and working through that is not very easy. And my last point is integration between SDGs and NDCs. When I joined CSIR a few years ago, I spent a bit of time writing about this integration between SDGs and NDCs. And one glaring difference between the two is that SDGs were never intended to be funded. This was a global commitment toward development, but you do that at your own cost. NDCs, well, one may argue they are in the same category, but there's a footnote there that I don't have time to explain. But my point I want to leave with is that in the implementation of both NDCs and SDGs, context matters. What's important in Sweden is not important in Swaziland. So as we drive, we encourage our countries to not only to set up NDCs, but to actively pursue achieving them. I mean, not to only set up NDC targets, but to actively pursue them. But that should be directly linked with development priorities. We've been struggling with this in this country. We've been struggling to find this sweet spot between reducing GHG emissions and being faithful to our development obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matlana, for this first Brazilian researcher at Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, Fiocruz, and also one of the founding fathers of G-STIC in its early days. They organized G-STIC in Brazil in 2023. Dr. Paulo Gadella is actively involved in debates on the 2030 agenda and its implications for public health. He was member of the UN 10-member group of high-level representatives from 2016-2020 and president of the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation in Brazil at that time. He currently coordinates the implementation of the Fiocruz strategy for the 2030 agenda, actively contributing to federal planning and facilitating territorialization of the SDGs at local level. So Dr. Paulo Gadella will shed his light on the health dimension of climate action. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lynn. What we'll bring is a more general consideration in terms of the connection of 2030 agenda, climate and health, climate change. But the first thing that we bring attention is that we have very important references globally, which some of them were constructed in the same year, such as the Paris Agreement, 2030 agenda, and the Sendai framework in terms of disasters. And also, we had before, but the biodiversity of the Kyoto Protocol. For us, this is all connected because the determinants of all these problems come from an unsustainable way of development, and it's fraught with injustice, with imbalances worldwide and so forth. But we think also that thinking of these different ways of separating for practical purposes in tackling these problems, the 2030 agenda is most comprehensive reference we have because it brings values, values of the famous 5 PPP, partnerships, people, planet, and prosperity in a partnership. And also, it brings are all the questions that, in some way, these different aspects of climate change, disasters, loss of biodiversity affect concretely people and populations. With the themes of food security, health, gender, and so forth. And this is, I'm going to lose this. This is something that it was strikingly said by Guterres when he says that it makes no sense to address climate change without linking it to the broader Sustainable Development Agenda, the 2030 Agenda. The intersection between climate and SDGs is fundamental to addressing the root cause of inequality, hunger, poverty, gender disparity, and health vulnerabilities, particularly in a world where planetary health, including the health of oceans and ecosystems, sustains human well-being. This is from 2023. And also how this affects the health area. And then we have this quote from Tedros, the Director General of WHO, who says, global warming is the greatest threat to human health worldwide. And the Paris Agreement is potentially the most impactful health agreement of the 21st century. This is very important, the statement of Tedros. We'll bring this later. But the idea of interactions and synergies between the 2030 Agenda and climate change, it was also part of a very important report by the UN, exactly showcasing the need to have these interactions, and also there is a significant overlap between the climate change effects and the SDGs, and the effects mostly low income and lower middle income countries, but also synergies in terms of making more effective the recognition of problems, the choice of technologies that have more spread out effects in terms of the action, both in the SDGs and climate change, trying to avoid side effects that will be complicated, for instance, in terms of climate change actions and some of SDGs. This is a very well discussed in the connection between energy, food, and health, and also the question of financing. So in terms of the connection of health, I mentioned the quote from Tedros, but this is an ongoing process. Traditionally, there was a sort of separation between what the world sector was dealing with, especially related to WHO, and what the Paris Agreement was tackling. And in the case of Paris Agreement, the major aspects were energy, deforestation, carbon print, and so forth. But the health field kept somehow apart. And this has been continually tried to make these connections. And this started in the Glasgow of the COP. There was an important initiative in Dubai where the health area did a sort of side event, which was the Health Day. And now the Health Day is an integral part of the COP30 program. And I will show also that we are moving forward very strongly in having the questions of health being part of the official declarations of COP30. The NDC targets was commented on our previous speaker. It's a pity that, because you know that in the meeting, in the deadline for the NDCs, only around 55 countries sent the NDCs, and there was very important countries like the US, the European Union, China, I think even India, that didn't send, so they won't be part of the official program of COP. But we are expecting them to send these NDCs, to have as part of the discussion. And the targets that they are bringing are still very not ambitious. They're not ambitious at all. No? In the case of Brazil, we moved forward in terms of, in 2025, having 37% of decrease in deforestation, in 2030, 50%, and we try to be a net zero in 2050. Brazil is very much committed to this. Sorry, I did something, okay. Let me see, I will try to, no, there's some problem here, let me see. Okay, I think they are saying that I have to stop because.
Still have a few minutes.
Okay, well, I will just make sure that there is a connection between, of course, the NDCs and the 2030 agenda. The RE6 from the assessment report brings the reference of 2030 agenda as a reference important for evaluation. And also in the case of Brazil, many of the targets are concretely related to SDGs. No? And we'll have as a highlight from the health field in the COP, the Belém Plan for Health, which has some important entries, health surveillance and monitoring, evidence-based policy and capacity building, innovation, sustainable health production, but together with the question of equity, community participation, and so forth. There would be much more to say, but I think it's just a main reference on how we think these questions of 2030 agenda and climate change are moving in the health field. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo. Please take a seat. And then as a third panelist, I would like to introduce Dr. Vipna Dhawan. She is Director General of the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI, also one of the co-founders of the G-STIC community, and was there in the early days with over 35 years of leadership in sustainable development, biotechnology, and clean energy. She is a fellow of the National Academy of Science in India and has authored multiple books and publications and advises national and international bodies, including the UN, SDGs, and India's Department on Biotechnology. Her numerous accolades include the 23 Social Impact Leadership Award and recognition as one of India's game changers in the United Arab Emirates. Dr. Viba will share her light on water and agriculture as entry points for integrated climate and development action. Please, Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't have a structured presentation, and purposefully I hasn't done it because I never knew what others are going to speak, so it shouldn't be repetition of what I have made the presentation on. And I do find that many of you perhaps don't have that much of knowledge what SDGs and climate change and NDCs, like what are the correlation between the two. We all know that climate change is not something which is limited to a particular continent or particular region. It is global. And therefore, whatever we do in one part of the world is going to have impact everywhere. It's like COVID. You couldn't contain it in any one country, and therefore, it becomes very essential that take everyone along. So if the developed part of the world becomes net zero, what is going to happen if the developing part is producing more emissions? So therefore, we won't be able to achieve. Let's also look into that why we started working on both NDCs as well as SDGs. NDCs are the country's commitment. What can I do as a country? And that is where the countries made commitments. Now let me also distinguish how the developed part of the world is different from the developing part. And especially since we are sitting in Africa, let's also look into what is happening over here, what is happening in India, what is happening in Brazil and other parts of the world. We all, when we talk of climate change, somewhere we start saying that it is due to the industrialization, or it's the industrialized part of the world which has contributed to climate change. Somewhere forgetting that we are also enjoying the fruits of that development of industrialization. And I don't think so they have done things wrong. Whatever the technologies were available, they have utilized those technologies. But now let's look at India, Africa, many other countries. We are on the trajectory of fast growth. That essentially means that what has been achieved by the developed part of the world in terms of industrialization, in terms of infrastructure development, and so on, we still have to achieve that. And therefore, when our countries make a commitment that our emissions are going to be lower than what we were in 2015 or 2020, that's a very bold step because their emissions still haven't peaked. Energy is directly related to your incomes. And also, like in the morning we heard that not all villages in Africa are electrified. So therefore, when we talk of per person energy, per capita energy consumption, it is low because of accessibility and affordability. It is going to go up. Now, when I come to SDGs, it is that we really have to look into the goals. We don't want people to remain below the poverty line. There are different, we have 18 SDG goals, and really speaking, we are falling behind the deadline or the goals that we have set forward. Different countries, they have fulfilled or they are on the right track for some, but not for all. And when we look at overall, perhaps we are lagging behind, which we can't afford to, because geopolitically, whatever is happening, somewhere it is also that dissatisfaction amongst many that they haven't done anything wrong and why should they remain poor, and something which is expressed in a very different way. Now, where is it again where we are lacking? Most of the time when we talk of sustainability, we talk of green infrastructure, there is a myth that green means expensive, which is usually not the case. It's a mindset. And therefore, somewhere we have to sensitize that it is not expensive. You can still achieve, you can live a comfortable life by following sustainable goals. In the morning, I did spoke about in agriculture, how you can utilize new technologies, and with using different way of watering your plants, irrigation, as well as using fertilizer, you can achieve very different results, or you're not compromising on productivity, you're getting the same, but you're not misusing your natural resources. Same is true when we talk of infrastructure. If we look at business as usual, if we look at what is going to be our demand for air conditioning alone, it's going to be perhaps in next 20 years, it's going to be equivalent to energy that we are consuming today. We don't have that luxury. Where will we produce so much of electricity from? That also asks us to look into, can my buildings be planned better? What kind of ventilation I should look for? What sort of building material should be used? And all those things, they will result in a comfortable life, almost same as what you are enjoying today, and without increasing the energy load. We in Terry, or in India, it's becoming very popular, what we call as earth air tunnel, because 6 meters below the earth, temperature is the ambient of that particular region. So in summer, you take the cool air from under the earth, and in winter, it's the other way around. and you really don't need air conditioning. So wherever land is available, you can do that. Ladakh, the state which wants to be net zero right from the beginning, the entire infrastructure planning is done on the basis of locally available material over there. Let's look into solar rooftops. Let's look into water recycling. Because what is happening, because of the distorted price of water, we are misusing this resource, we are not recycling it, because there is a cost associated with recycling, and we forget somewhere that in years to come, we won't be able to generate water. And therefore, whether it is water bodies in the region, we need to take care of those. Again, coming back to the awareness issue, because what also happens is that we really don't know what we are doing. Where are we going wrong? And I'd like to mention to you about one initiative which has been launched in India. It's called LIFE. It is Lifestyles for Sustainable Growth. And that basically, like each citizen of the country, let's look into their carbon footprint. So if I'm using a metro, and for that distance, I'll also get sort of, if I had gone by car, what would have been my carbon footprint? So that way, you have to ensure that every citizen is part of saving energy, is part of reducing the carbon footprint. Again, coming back to agriculture, because in the morning also I mentioned that we usually take it as an activity which is net carbon positive, but that's usually not the case. And where we tend to forget is that where are we using, or what is the carbon footprint? The entire, what we are talking of biofuels today, biofuels, and especially when we talk of it's coming from the food crops like maize, then what is the carbon footprint of producing maize? Because it's the embedded carbon that we have to look into ultimately. So what I would like to say in the end, that if we want this planet to be livable, there is no other way than to ensure that we reduce carbon footprint of each one of us. Somewhere we have to overcome this myth that greener means expensive. It is the same, it's your mindset which needs to be changed. There are alternatives available, and all said and done, sustainable development goals is something which we need to meet. There is no alternative if we want peace on this planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vivian, for your statement. Then the next panelist I would like to introduce is Dr. Lauren Haywood. Dr. Lauren is a natural scientist by training whose research at the CSIR focuses on addressing sustainability challenges through a social, ecological system perspective. Her work explores the dynamic interactions between environmental and societal factors with the aim of informing integrated long-term solutions for sustainable development in South Africa and beyond. Dr. Haywood, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I would like to share some of my reflections on the role of education in shaping a resilient, sustainable future. It was a former minister of the Department of Forestries, Fisheries and the Environment who said, sustainable development, and by the extension, the achievement of the SDGs, is only possible if it is underpinned by an environmentally literate society. In response to this, a partnership was formed between the Department of Forestries, Fisheries and the Environment in South Africa, as well as the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, and together with the Human Sciences Research Council and the CSIR, we created what we call the Citizens Environmental Awareness Index, or CEAI. Okay, this index is determined from the results of a biannual survey of adults in South Africa. It takes into perspective the South African public's understanding and knowledge about their interest in the environment, the knowledge about environmental issues, their concern about environmental issues, and their pro-environmental actions across a number of key environmental themes. These include the general environment in general. It also looks at an understanding of climate change, looks at the understanding of sustainable energy sources, that of water, specifically that of water quality and quantity, of biodiversity, air quality and air pollution, waste and littering, and also the oceans and beaches in South Africa. The first survey was undertaken in 2022, and this was followed by the second survey in 2024. The survey provides us with a rich data set that we can use not only to develop the index itself to get an understanding of South Africa's environmental literacy, but also it enables us to dig deeper into the actual themes and us to unpack some of the challenges that may be, that are kind of in that source of data. So understanding the differences between the literacy of age groups or the demographic differences as well as education levels, etc. So if we have a quick look at the Citizen Environmental Awareness Index and look at some of the results, understanding that the index is on a scale of 0 to 100, it's not a percentage, it's just a score, you will see that the overall environmental interest among South Africans scored at 60 in 2024. This is a decrease of 5 points from the 2022 survey. If we look at environmental awareness scored a 52, which is up 2 points from 2022. Environmental concern, this is 55, it is down 3 points. Pro-environmental norms, it sits at 51, it's down 7 points from 2022. And the pro-environmental actions sits at 42, which is down, it's up 1 point. So these findings really reflect that South Africa hovers around a mid-mark, reflecting that South Africa really has a very moderate environmental literacy. This highlights that we, as a society, have a long way to go before we can collectively contribute towards achieving the SDGs. If we have a quick look at the results in terms of climate change literacy, in terms of climate change in the South African public, we will see in the bottom row here, they were asked about how much they know about climate change. You will see that the self-reflected knowledge continues to increase. So a question like this has been fielded since 2007. So since 2007, we've seen an increase in the self-reported knowledge of South Africans, seeing that as of 2024, just over 50% of the population say they know a lot or a fair amount about climate change. The next two indicators are around skepticism, so trend skepticism and attribute skepticism. We notice that the skepticism has declined. But in terms of the top skepticism, we see that there's still a large percentage of the population that believe that humans do not contribute towards climate change. The last indicator at the very top there is around concern. Obviously, the public were asked how concerned they are about climate change. And you'll see there, disappointingly, that in terms of having a very high or extremely high concern, this is very low, with only 45% of the South African adult population saying that they are extremely or very concerned about climate change. And you'll see since these surveys were initiated or fielded, this extreme concern hasn't ever increased above the 50% population rate. So the question is, maybe we should just have a look quickly at if we look at this in terms of age group. I think it's very important because most of us have an opinion that our youth, which in this case is the bottom, the dark blue, which is between the ages of 16 and 24, they would have a higher level of knowledge in terms of climate change, especially considering that this is taught in our schools, and also that they experience this on a day-to-day basis in terms of extreme weather events, whether it be increases in temperatures or floods or tornadoes, such as in KZN. But this is not the case. You'll see there that the youth, or the age groups between 16 and 24, they are not, the survey shows that no real big difference between the youth and the older generations. And this also goes all the way up to concern. We've seen there that in terms of very or extremely concerned, the youth are not any more concerned than the other populations. In fact, you'll see some of the older generations or age groups are more concerned about climate change than our youth. So what are are these actually telling us? Are we failing in terms of our environmental education? The evidence would suggest that this is the case. Our youth are no more literate than our older generations. And it's important to note that without a generation shift, we risk stagnation. We risk not moving forward. We risk not being able to change our future. So the disconnect really lies between knowledge and lived reality. Climate change may appear in our curriculums and in our schools, and our kids are being taught this, but it is not shaping the aspirations of the youth, especially here in South Africa. So we need a new approach. What is that new approach? Well, for me, that approach would be to link knowledge to opportunity. Environmental challenges are continuously being framed in the perspective of a problem or a crisis, but we really need to change that. We need to really look at informing and translating that into spaces for entrepreneurship, for innovation, especially for our youth. So if young people see the challenges that they inherit from us and past generations as opportunities for innovation, opportunities for career growth, of social impact, we can inspire a mindset. And if we do that, if we inspire a mindset and shift, we can build a climate resilient future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing in this interesting angle of the climate change literacy. As a last speaker, and I hope everything goes well online, we have Dr. Xiaohong Wang, sorry if I pronounce it not correctly, and she's the director of the Transparency Division at the UNFCCC Secretariat. She has 30 years of experience in environmental, natural resource management and climate change. She has played a pivotal role in shaping and implementing the global climate transparency system. Since she joined the UNFCCC Secretariat in 2010, she led the development and operationalization of the transparency arrangements under the Convention and the Paris Agreement. She held senior positions across government, academia, and international organizations, and she holds a PhD in environmental studies, bringing in profound expertise in shaping policies, driving climate ambition, and advancing a green and sustainable future. Dr. Wang, the floor is yours.
Well, and I'm not sure whether you can see me. I'm very sorry that I'm not able to join you there in person for this very, very important meeting. But I'm now actually sharing with you our perspectives. I'm happy to contribute to this conversation from a transparency angle. And also earlier in this session, the previous panelists really shared looking at the topic from a different perspective. So it's really a lot of rich information. And I'm also happy to see Brian there. We have been working together quite a while ago. It's really to be back in touch again. So as mentioned, we earlier panelists also talk about this, current complex geopolitical context, and I would like to start off by saying that, during this challenging time with the current geopolitical context, multilateralism is more important than ever. And against this backdrop, the transparency mechanism under the Paris Agreement is key to build trust and enhance international cooperation on global climate actions. And through the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement that all the parties designed in 2015 through the Paris Agreement, countries actually have the opportunity and mechanism to turn their climate pledges commitments, including those made through the NDCs, nationally determined contributions, into measurable progress and tangible results. So under the transparency framework of the Paris Agreement, every 2 years, each country prepares and submits the annual transparency report, or the BTRs. So these reports, national reports, actually provide standardized, comparable data and information covering the full spectrums of the Paris Agreement implementation, including on GHG emissions and renewables, progress in implementing and achieving NDCs, climate impacts and adaptation, as well as financial technology development and transfer and capacity building support provided and received. So transparent reporting in that sense empowers all governments and generates the data and information needed to make evidence-based policy decisions to design stronger climate policies to attract finance and to advance sustainable development goals. So by openly sharing this information, countries not only ensure accountability and to their citizens and the international community, they also build trust and confidence and strengthen international cooperation. So this year, 2025, marks a key milestone of the full implementation of the transparency system under the Paris Agreement. I'm happy to share that up to now, about 112 countries submitted their very first annual transparency reports. In a few weeks, the UNFCCC Secretariat will present the very first annual BTR synthesis report based on the BTR submitted by all countries. So this BTR synthesis report will provide aggregated information on efforts by all countries and therefore to inform global progress on NDC implementation. So in essence, the information in the BTR synthesis report will be critical to assess the state of implementation and global progress towards the Paris Agreement goals. And the report will help assess current trends and identify where actions must accelerate to stay on track towards limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, strengthen climate resilience, and step up on climate finance and support. In order to facilitate the preparation and submission of annual transparency reports, the UNFCCC Secretariat continuously provide technical support to the countries that need it, recognizing that some countries require ongoing technical assistance, training, and capacity building to fully implement the transparency mechanism under the Paris Agreement. While this year is the first year for the full implementation of the transparency mechanism, this is also the year when all parties must submit new, more ambitious NDCs to realign global efforts with the Paris Agreement goals. So in this context, the transparency mechanism is a vital part of the ambition cycle. So the transparency data and information, as earlier mentioned, will help track progress towards NDCs, highlighting successes and where additional efforts may be needed. And this in turn enables countries to set more ambitious goals and attract support for further action. Credible climate information also helps direct resources to where they are most urgently needed, helping to turn NDC target into action. It builds trust between finance providers and recipients, mobilizing increased funding to facilitate higher ambition. In addition, many countries we find reported in their first BTRs how their national climate actions contribute directly to sustainable development goals, highlighting effective climate change policies and measures that benefit people and nature. This transparent information allows better alignment of policies, mobilize finance, and deliver co-benefits and synergies that support both climate and development priorities. It demonstrates how transparency connects the climate actions and broader sustainable development agendas. And lastly, I would like to mention that transparency is not only the responsibility of national governments. The non-state actors also played an increasingly important role in the transparency ecosystems. Civil society, private sector, academia, subnational governments, and other stakeholders can be data providers, making the reporting under the transparency mechanism more robust and accurate. And furthermore, non-party stakeholders can leverage the information collected through this transparency mechanism for their own activities, including research activities related to climate change and sustainable development. So I would like to finish my intervention by highlighting that transparency is not just about compliance. It is about building trust, enabling ambition, and ensuring accountability. It is about turning the Paris Agreement into real progress on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Stay with us online because we can go now entering in the debate, and I would like to invite all panelists to reflect on the statements of the others, and I have a few questions prepared myself, but feel free to add to that if you have some, if you want to make it more interactive and go in discussion with your peer panelists. So first, Dr. Brian, you told me that you keep a close look on the third round of NDCs that are being submitted right now in preparation of the COP in Brazil. Do you see an evolution in this next version of the NDCs compared to the previous one? And especially the reference to the SDGs on which we're talking today?
Yeah, I have taken time to look at the recently submitted NDCs. Just to remind you, you'll recall that about 2 weeks ago, many countries were officially launching their new NDCs in New York at the UNGA. So I was tracking who is submitting and what are they saying in those submissions. Naturally, my interest was on what the EU is saying, what China is saying, what Australia is saying. It was nice to read the Nigeria's NDC. What's common to all of them is that all of them have become faithful to the principle that was agreed in Paris, which is each NDC must be more ambitious than the previous one. So that's the first thing I want to highlight, is that all of them are committing to an ambitious target, a more ambitious target than the previous one. The second thing that I picked up for me that I saw was coverage of gases, was the scope of gases. There's still consistency. You'll recall that you must be, as a country must be clear what gases are covered, and if you've covered that gas in this NDC, in the next one, you must also continue to cover it. So I was also checking whether that's happening in these NDCs, and I picked up that is consistent. So just to be brief, one is the ambition is clear in the new NDCs. Secondly is, for me, what also I was looking for is clarity on how are they going to achieve those NDCs. I do not have enough time to talk about that, but that's where the question is. It's one thing to set the target. Is the other to spell out what's going to take you to that target. And each NDC has a different level of clarity that provides understanding on the progress towards that target, which is what Shu Wong was talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I can jump to Dr. Wang, because I hope you're still online, because if you say clarity is very important in the NDCs, then you're talking also about transparency, of course, which you stated is also quite essential. How do you look at the transparency and the policies defined in the NDCs? And do you have a reaction on the analysis of which Brian shared? I think you're still muted. No, sorry, we don't hear you. A quick look to the technical support. Yeah, really sorry, Dr. Wang, we don't hear you here. Please take a moment, we'll come back to you on this question. I would like to switch then to Paulo. Also about transparency, I think, and clarity. Yeah? You have the angle of health impacts and relation with climate action. Do you see real progress? I mean, you are a health specialist. What are the main health risks that have co-benefits with climate action? And do you see real progress already in that field?
Well, just previous comment on Brian's comment, because I like to see his optimistic view. But, you know, we are having more than 9 of the planet boundaries being broken. No perspective of keeping the 1.5 goal, which is already, you know, done. And we know that when we have this to 2 or even more 3 degrees, all of this will be really take a dramatic and catastrophic change. The fact that the countries didn't do it officially at the time, it was a worry. President Lula is a bit more optimistic. They will present this before COP, and we'll have the possibility of integrating in this discussion. But you know, I would like if you could comment on this, because we had, from not a very deep analysis, not very optimistic. And so even in terms of, even if the NDCs are obliged to go a step further, but this step is so short, it doesn't have ambitions measures. And what we're seeing is the contrary. We are seeing a move worldwide from the questions of sustainability to the questions of defense. Defense, national defense, Europe, States, Russia, and so forth. No? So the focus moved a lot. With the war with Russia and we had a change in Europe in terms of the use of fossil fuels. I mean, I don't see how we could really be optimistic in what's going on, you know, and we hope to have, but now going to the field of health, no? I think there is an increasing, as I said, in terms of consciousness of the effects of climate on health, and also in trying to face this with more political, technical, and I think this will be reflected in COP. No? I didn't mention, but the health system as a whole is responsible for 5% of the carbon footprint. This is usually not taken into consideration because we don't think in terms of mitigation, but we think in terms only of adaptation. And we have this advocacy that if the health system, for instance, Brazil, which has a unified health system, would be an advocate for climate change, the capability of permeability and convening power would be immense. And what we are now having, and I think there is a lot of progress, is in the question of adaptation. You know, we participated in this preparatory meeting, which was an official COP event of the Belém Plan, and there are very structured and consequent national programs, and Brazil did this in a participatory way to have the unified health system as part of the adaptation, which is essential in terms of the health response. So there is an increase, but again, you know, we have to come this as a worldwide and global health Of course, we are not having this from some countries, on the contrary, and we are hoping to Belém plan reflect this.
Maybe I would like to go to VIBA, because what you put a rather pessimistic view, Paulo, on the progress that we are making. Also seeing the shift to adaptation. Also, I attended several COPs during the last years, and I saw, first it was mitigation, and now everything is shifting to adaptation, but to some extent quite decoupled. While they can be coupled. There are also co-benefits between them. Viba, maybe you can shed a light, because also the agricultural food sector, where you're really experienced in, is much about adaptation. And how do you see to this shift, and how optimistic are you? Or do you share the dark view of Paulo?
Well, the topic which you are discussing is very interesting, and you're absolutely right. And when we talk of NDCs, the country makes certain commitments. And I must say, when I look at India, the government is very, very serious about achieving it. And there are different ways of achieving that. One, I mentioned to you about Mission Life. But then we are also looking into the other pathway, how the corporates are going to go about it. So their net zero plans. So they also make plans, and we are looking into scope 2 and scope 3 emissions as well. There is another thing which has been introduced, ESG. So it is environment sustainability governance. So each listed company has to give their ESG score. Of course, it's an evolving system, because right now companies are basically whatever they are good in, they're reporting that, but in years to come, we are going to have a format. We are also looking at that, how do we ensure the small and medium enterprises, because they're the ones which give almost 60 to 65% of total manufacturing. How do you ensure that they are also green? And that is where we are looking at green budgeting and green procurement strategies at state level. So it's the entire ecosystem which is getting developed. We are looking at renewables, and then it's not just renewable, because few years back they're expensive. Today, they are no more expensive, but then you also have to look into reliability, especially when you are talking of solar. What do you do during night time? You are also looking at apart from reliability, the storage, the grid. So all those things are simultaneously to be worked upon so that you ensure the supply. Let's also look into the carbon markets which are now developing. Because otherwise, what is there for me? Why should I change? And that is where, when you tell the farmer that if you adopt cleaner technologies, you will also be financially compensated for. Let's look at the rural kitchen. For them, energy transition is access to cleaner fuel. And there are two ways of convincing them. One is that firewood, yes, they simply go and collect it. But then when they burn it, what is going to be the impact on their health? The other is, which will give them finances as well, can we convince our respective governments that give them carbon credits as well? Because ultimately, it's also saving GHG emissions, ultimately. You look at the farm sector as a whole, cattle, methane emissions. Can we also work on that the fodder which we give them is also green? Let me also tell you, all this is interconnected. Let's look into, I'll give another example, and that's of biofuels. And of course, there is, I should say, Brazil is leaders. They have shown the way to the world that fuels can be produced in a sustainable way. Then most of the production then started coming from maize. And maize through extensive cultivation with lot of agricultural inputs. So we have to look back how sustainable production of maize is. Can we look at the other agriculture residues? They can be far more sustainable. And you actually, because in many countries we burn the agriculture residue, can that be better put off? Let's look into biogas technology, compressed CNG. So and in next few years, the world will see a lot of changes. We are looking at energy transition at various levels. We are looking at energy security, and it's going to be different for different regions of the world. Somewhere it will be biogas, somewhere it will be ethanol production, somewhere maybe it will be methanol, hydrogen. We have a long way to go. But ultimately, our emissions from energy are going to come down. Similarly, because of the geopolitical conditions, and otherwise also, when we are looking at production of ammonia, the agriculture sector is also going to see a lot of changes. We are looking at water recycling, and so many other things. So ultimately, if we start putting what is the total GHG emissions or carbon footprint, we'll be far more sensible in moving from one technology to the other. And that has already started happening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to go to Lauren. You brought in a very specific view on the awareness of citizens around environmental issues such as climate change, and also there, to my feeling, it was not a real optimistic view. So environmental awareness and priority for the citizens is decreasing, if I understand well from your statistics. How can you turn it around? Because how does it feed policies to be more ambitious in climate action, or how can you turn this around?
Thank you. Well, I definitely didn't want it to be a negative view. I was actually trying to highlight that, we are kind of moving in the right direction. It is very moderate at the moment here in South Africa. But that is actually, rather than glass half empty, it's a glass half full. Let's see it as an opportunity. Now we know. Before we did not know that was the case. Now we know. Now we can work on it. We've got those information around each of the different themes. We can now look deeper into it. Where are the specific gaps? Where do we need to target it? We have broken it down between all the 9 provinces in the country. We know, for example, we would have thought potentially the Western Cape would have had a very high literacy. However, that's not necessarily the case. It's sitting at with the Free State, which is very peculiar. We don't understand that, but it now gives us the opportunity to look into those, to see where we can have those changes. It gives us opportunity, because it is a government initiative, where and how they can look at changing national policy, how they can work with the educators, especially in schools and universities, and to make those changes. So it's definitely not a negative perspective. I think it's a positive perspective. We've got to look at it that way. And I say, really looking at it from bringing it as an opportunity. We really need to, I know when I look on the news and stuff, it's always doom and gloom. And the youth back away from that. They don't want to see doom and gloom. For them, this is the reality that they live in. We need to actually show them that the problems of the future is their future, and they need to make a future out of that. And they really can do that. So by looking at it and not seeing it as a negative, how can we build upon it? And I think there's lots and lots of opportunities to do that. And I think we've discussed a lot of them here in the panel already, sitting in agriculture and health. So yeah, let's look at it as a positive, and looking at where and how we can get our kids to adapt, and not just look at mitigation measures.
Okay, thank you. Maybe adding to that, another question. You have a very young population here in South Africa and also in other African countries where young people have to choose for education. Do you see it indeed also as an opportunity that they take to engage in science and technology education and become to develop the technologies of the future, which we'll definitely need?
I definitely think so. I mean, I think it is at the moment, if we can start highlighting to the kids, because I know in South Africa our employment rate is very, very low. So if we can start highlighting to the youth that there is opportunities in the challenges that we have. I mean, we're looking at, South Africa is really on the bandwagon of a circular economy at the moment. We're really trying to instill the fact in the youth that we mustn't start seeing things as waste, actually as a resource, and actually showing them how their future lie. I did a talk at the school, high school the other day, and put it to the kids about, seeing the perspective of waste and having a career in waste. And people looked at me like I was crazy. Like, why would I, as a young person who aspires to be wealthy, look at waste? But I think after we gave them a talk and showed them where the opportunities lie, that there's a lot of minds that were changed. So I think it's about showing them where those changes are, which we ourselves don't necessarily know, right? Because if we did, we would be on that pathway already. But letting them understand that they have the power to innovate and be creative. and to deal with our challenges, and that the glass is definitely half full for them.
Thank you. I would like to try to go back to Dr. Wang on the topic of transparency, and also the statement that was made earlier, transparency in the progress that we make, but also transparency in clear policies and the impact that they can have on mitigation and adaptation. Can you give some feedback on the statement that was made? Dr. Wang, we don't hear you yet. No, we still don't have sounds from you, really sorry. You hear us? No, so really sorry. Yes, now you're muted again. No, okay. We lost Dr. Wang, really sorry. Yes, okay. Thanks again for all the interventions. As you know, so the title of this session was, Can Climate Action be a Catalyst to the SDGs? I do think, and I would like to do a quick round of the speakers again, I do see that a lot of other policy priorities, such as what Paulo referred at, that security, they might be a catalyst for climate action. Do you agree, or how do you look at it? Dr. Brian?
I'm gonna come back to the security issue. I want to start with where Paulo was talking about my initial input, which he says is optimistic, and I agree with him. It is optimistic. I also agree that taken together, what we have now in terms of the commitments that are indicated in the NDCs, they are not sufficient to take us to the 1.5 degree. So that's point number one. I think that's point number one, is that taken together, they are insufficient to take us to what we agreed, what we agreed in Paris. Second point is, let me just finish that. Without the Paris Agreement, without the NDCs, not this set that has just been submitted now, if you exclude those, the global trajectory was to 4.4 degrees without NDCs, business as usual. But with the NDCs that we had, it's 2.2 degrees globally. We have not yet received all the NDCs for the latest round, so we do not have the numbers. As Shuang was saying, we'll get the synthesis next month or later this month. That's the first point, is the inadequacy of the existing commitments. The second point, though, is progression from the existing commitments. It's a different conversation. It's saying the new NDCs are more ambitious than the previous ones. It's not saying that they are going to help us to take us to the 1.5 degree. And in the transparency work, which is where I spent my youth a few years back, we track progress over time. So we compare what you are saying now versus what you said before. And the third point I want to come to, so for me, I celebrate that. I celebrate that individually countries are more ambitious than the last NDCs. Third point, and so last point in this input, there's a security question. Third point is the imperfection character of the NDCs. The NDC is a political output. By design, it's not meant to be perfect, precisely because it's a UN output. So you have to agree as 189 countries. And its weakest, its Achilles heel, its main Achilles heel is that it is nationally determined. Most importantly, it is voluntary. And therefore, we cannot force countries to do X, Y, Z as a global climate community. We are on the mercies of their determination. This was what countries politically could agree with in 2014 in Peru and in 2015 in Paris. So that's the prevailing inadequate political framing of NDCs. It's what we have to make it work. And countries are trying to make it work. Imperfection, trying to make it perfect. Last point on security, I have huge discomfort linking climate and security. Huge discomfort linking climate with security. I think there are channels, there are pathways that are connecting the two, but my main concern is that one of the strengths of the UN process, and I'm of the view that the UN process taken together with all its very different components needs to be redesigned, but there's one strength of the UN process, its ability to hear everyone's voice. Is the place where, is the platform where every voice can be heard. And if we remove that, if we remove that and link directly climate change with security, my concern is taking climate change to the Security Council in the UN. And the Security Council is not for everybody, as you know. It's a body for very few countries, most of which are the core drivers of the problem that's called climate change. And by putting it in that agenda of the UN security system, you are removing the very victims of the impacts of climate change. So it's a personal view, it's not a scientific view, but I just feel that that link, although it can be stretched, and I have written about it and I do know about it, I still think that the venue of that conversation should not be the UN Security Council. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a clear appeal. Paulo, could health policy be a catalyst, or do you want to react on Brian's statement?
First, it was very nice to have cautiously optimist, and it was nice to hear Brian. We from the health area were always very, I would say, attentive in terms of use of security. Because we defend the idea of a global health, of harmonizing, and security came to health, and there was a big dispute between different countries at the WHO. And it always brings the question that you move only when you have specific threats that you are recognized, and usually it's asymmetric. It happened, for instance, in the case of COVID, totally asymmetric. You know, so they started moving, which was a global problem, but there was no worry about access, equality. Only 7 countries had 70% of the vaccines. We talked this morning. There is always this, as I said, it's asymmetric because it's usually the powerful, you mentioned the Security Council, and of course it's related also to the idea of control. And when you take the question of security, for instance, as a more general question of moving from investments in sustainable development for security in terms of military security, then this is a catastrophic. I haven't seen any figures about what's the carbon footprint, for instance, for the bombing of Gaza or the war between Russia and Ukraine, or all the money that the United States is putting on, and the increase also of the budgets in Europe in terms of building some more security. So we are very a bit, but of course, if this thing comes, okay, we have reached an emergence point in which our security is affected, it may help in some ways. No? As to the, we'll see what will happen at COP. You know, I mean, we are 2 months from the COP, We are speculating. It started with the idea of COP being the COP for sustainable development. That was the word. Now is the COP for adaptation. Now this is a big change. It's a pragmatic, they understand the diplomatic consultation, because people need something concrete to see implemented. What will be really implemented? We'll see that 2 months from now. I mean, the financing, 300 billion was what we got in Baku. We'll be able to go to the 1.3, very improbably. Brazil is trying to make other ways of creative engineering in terms of financing that would be interesting for both sides. The tropical forest forever, for instance, is one of the questions that we are dealing with. But the perspective is that we won't reach these goals. And of course, we'll see. There is a lot of frustration. It's COP30, and the main idea that people have is a lot of principles, a lot of talks, and no real progress. But again, there are progress, we know, technological and many others, and so half full, half empty.
We are coming to more or less the end of the session, but I see Dr. Wang online again. I will try to do a last attempt. I hope you could follow the discussions. We were talking about COP, so that's also your field, of course. So if you can give feedback on what has been said here, that would be very welcome. We are very sorry, but we still don't hear you. Now, okay, try again, please.
Excellent. Because I missed quite a bit of the panel discussions because of the connection issue, but I'll quickly say that also what Brian just now mentioned about the importance of building confidence. Because the current reporting system basically provides a global picture of what parties collectively are with regards to the 2030 NDC target. And of course, we know the implementation of the current NDC paves the way for the new NDC that is being submitted now. So I think transparency presents the key mechanism to provide that confidence. Our initial assessment based on the BTR submitted show that majority of parties are really making a very good initial progress towards their 2030 targets, which then gives confidence and credibility for the more ambitious 2035 NDC, which are the round of NDCs that parties are submitting now. So that's one thing that I'd like to share, and also very much look forward to COP30 and to all contribution from all stakeholders. I'm not sure whether you can hear, you have heard of this conversation, but yeah, I'll just stop there. I hope that you have captured what I've said.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. We are coming to the end, but Vida, please comment on that.
Well, very interesting discussion, and what I would like to add is that if we look at Sustainable Development Goals, basically we are looking at that sector of the society have-nots. And they are the worst affected due to the climate change, because if there is flood in my country, it is perhaps they go back 2 generations, while if there is flood in a developed part of the world, maybe they'll lose 5% of their wealth or whatever. And that too will be insured, so they don't lose anything. So what we are basically looking at, both SDGs and NDCs, that is, we are basically looking at how do we ensure that we are moving towards equality. And really speaking, how do we ensure that climate change, which is worst enemy of the economically weaker section of the society. How do we overcome that? So the three are very much interconnected, and that is where we are looking at solutions to find out. We are looking at how do we reduce the changing climate. It won't be, I won't say it will be before 2 degrees centigrade. And it will take time to reverse, but if we are going for cleaner energy, it's going to take us few years before emissions are actually reduced. And therefore, there is going to be a gap till we achieve that. Till that time, let's also look into adaptation. Like if we are looking at agriculture, what are the kind of crops they can grow? How do we ensure natural resource management in those regions? How do we ensure that farmer is benefited for adopting cleaner technologies? And that's true for all SMEs, farmers, all sectors of the society, so we have to reach them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to comment on that, Lynn? Yeah.
I'll just make a quick comment, and just that building SDGs into education is very, very important. Uplifting citizens, if one citizen becomes more aware of the environmental issues and improves their efficacy and norms towards dealing with it, imagine what kind of impact we can have. Just changing, if we just look at waste, for example, if more and more people become aware of waste or start knew about the single-use plastic and stopped requesting single-use plastic, imagine the change that we can make. So education and education as a single citizen is really, really important. It can make the changes that we need.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is also a clear call to also research and science institutes to commit to this ambition, and also make sure that that we share the information that we need. I think we had a very interesting debate on the link between climate action and SDGs. They can mutually reinforce each other. Also, other policies can do so, but also looked at the role of the NDCs for paving the way, making transparent where we are going at, will stay crucial. So let's look at the glass half full. We are really making progress, and we would not be here without the NDCs where we are now. So I would like to thank my distinguished panelists for the rich discussions and the interesting contributions, and I would like to close the panel and wish you a fine afternoon.